Hey, it's George from Australia, and welcome to Gaming My Whole Life, where I discuss everything video game related, past, present, and future. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have a video which I've really been wanting to put together. I've had to make myself be super patient so I can play more and more of the game, and that game, of course, is Yooka Laylee. Now, this is a really interesting Kickstarter story. The experience, the feedback from the community, from gamers alike, from the industry, from everyone. Yooka Laylee, you've probably heard of this game. Probably you heard that it didn't live up to the expectations that were set for this highly successful Kickstarter. At least that's the general impression if you haven't played the game for yourself or if you haven't looked into any deeper. I accepted that initial impression. I did. I was very interested because I am an old school retro fan. I mean, I just have, the original Super Nintendo just sitting here for no reason because I just love video games that much. I love keeping up with the industry. I love seeing what's coming out, and I love bringing up the old stuff as much as possible just because it was my childhood, it's my place of happiness, and I really like the perspective of being able to go back. So of course I was interested in Yooka Laylee, and then it was that Kickstarter that promised, hey, we're gonna bring back 3D platformers, and it's from developers who were part of the Banjo and Kazooie team. So quickly bring up to date, Banjo Kazooie came out on the Nintendo 64 and was revered. It was by Rare, which at the time worked with Nintendo before Microsoft bought them later on. But this game was adored and loved by fans. Now, I'll be honest, as much of a retro geek I am, and as much as I certainly did live through that generation, I missed out on Banjo Kazooie. I knew of it, but when you're a child and you rely on your parents to buy you your video games, maybe one on your birthday, maybe one at Christmas, you don't get to play as many games as you would have liked, and Banjo Kazooie was sadly one of those experiences I just happened to have missed out on. That said, I really liked what Yooka Laylee was offering to bring to the table. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I love my violent games, I love my survival horror, I love my tactics, I love my, all genre of video games, and any one of my loyal subscribers know I talk about everything you can think of, but it's very rare I get to enjoy just an old school 3D platformer. And you know what? I love old school 3D platformers. I love them. They were just a wonderful, magical, colorful place that, slowly and sadly and gradually just sort of faded out into existence. Like, people didn't really want it that much, or at the very least, the games stopped developing. So Yooka Laylee was going to be the savior, the revival of this genre, right? The people have spoken, the ex-Rare employees, the ex-developers, the character artists who worked on Banjo Kazooie, and also the environmental artists and some amazing sound people were going to bring it back. And then it came and it got all this attention, it got all this funded, and they succeeded all the funding goals that they wanted on Kickstarter, right? Blew it out of the water, blew it thousands and thousands of backers, 2 point something million pounds, a euro, whatever, a lot of money. And then when it came out, we got 7 out of 10s. And that's from the people who didn't hate it. There were people who gave it even worse. And look, when that happened, a lot of us, we took a step back. We're like, oh, okay, maybe this didn't work. Maybe this didn't happen. They meant well. Maybe they'll blow in smoke up our butts, whatever. It doesn't seem like it's the game they were all promised, right? The general impression I got, and why I didn't get the game initially, was, hey, Yooka Laylee feels pretty empty. Like, yeah, it's a 3D platformer, and all the old things from the past that people apparently didn't like were brought forward. They didn't innovate. And you can enjoy this game with really low expectations, don't expect it to be anything special, and a lot of people just outright hated it. But of course, I'm not going to bait you with, did I think this game was good? Watch the video to find out. Like, no, you've seen the thumbnail. I haven't even designed the thumbnail yet, but I know it's going to be glowing because I absolutely loved Yooka Laylee. Like, oh my goodness, I saw it on sale, and it was like only $10, $11 Australian, and I thought, you know what, I don't care if the reviews weren't so fantastic. I was always curious, I was always interested. I can afford $10, let's do this. And just This game is amazing. I'm not even joking. I am not joking. This game, as far as I'm concerned, delivers on what it promised, right? Managing expectations of someone who grew up with games from that era, from that generation, and being able to experience it now on modern hardware. Oh, we are going to have fun, ladies and gentlemen, with this video. This video is not going to be quick. It's not going to be painfully slow, but it's not going to be quick. We are going to admire and just soak up all the goodness of this game. This video is going to be for those fans of Yooka Laylee who, like me, at some point or another, went ahead and got it and thought, oh, this is actually good. What gives? I was blown away by so many things. So this is going to be one of those feel-good videos, right? Feel-good videos. We're just going to admire the game. I'm literally going to show the camera slowly rotating as we take in the beauty of this 3D platform, as I talk about what I feel they did right and what I feel they did really right, you know? I'm not going to say this is perfect, and you know what? I never call any game perfect, frankly. But you know what? This is going to be fun. This is going to be fun. If you're a fan, you're going to agree with me. If you're on the fence, this is going to push you over the fence to go ahead and get the game. Alrighty, so let's slowly, calmly, all fun, all excited, you know, like if you're a coffee drinker, if you're of age, you know, go boil yourself a coffee, make yourself a tea, grab yourself some popcorn, you know, put on a retro hat. You know what, I'll try to get into the spirit of things myself, right? I want to set the tone. We're going to slowly go over this beautiful, beautiful game that I enjoyed so much, and just, I am so glad I enjoyed it. Now look, if you are not a fan of what it was offering, right, which was like a modern Banjo Kazooie, or more specifically, just a return to 3D platformers of old, if you weren't interested in that hot take, or maybe you weren't around to experience it in all its glory, this game probably isn't for you. If you're old enough where you do miss that sort of platforming, that simpleness, this is for you. Don't let this go by. Don't let the many mixed reviews stop you from experiencing this game, right? It is wonderful. It is wonderful. So straight away at the start of the game, you're introduced to your first move, which is Laylee using Yooka as a barrel, you know, as a barrel, like very Donkey Kong Country style. You just roll up a hill because there's certain surfaces that you can't roll up. You need to roll it up, and also teaches you a way where you can move around fast in the game. It also lets you know that, hey, this costs stamina. So you can't go around through the whole game just blazing through it. For the most part, you'll be walking, but when you want to speed things up, you can do that, right? So you do that. It's a very nice, simple mechanic. You're like, cool, you know? As soon as you go forward, right, you got up that first bit of hill, and you can see left to right this huge, gigantic existing world with or without you, and I was just immediately in awe. I'm like, wow, this is nice. This is very nice. I can go in any direction I want. Where do I go? Ultimately, I chose to go to the right. So I go to the right, I go up the bridge, and I come across my first NPC, which is, you know, a skeleton adventurer who thinks they're Indiana Jones. And you know, you need to save them, and they're just wacky, right? It's just both like, okay, all right, cool. I like this video game logic, you know. Video game logic dictates that no explanation is needed for you to be talking to a skeleton. That's video game logic, and I love it that way, right? You don't ask questions. You don't ask questions in true video game logic. Not everything needs an explanation. And that's what made the old games of old a little bit magical, right? It didn't need to make sense. It just needed to be fun. Just needed to be silly, you know? You soon learn that the enemies that attack you go down very easily, you know? One simple press of the button, you do a little bit of a spin attack, you know? So it reminds me of Crash Bandicoot, or maybe even a little bit of Sonic. You do one spin attack, they go flying. I did really like the design of the enemies, because when I saw them from afar, they seem to be standing there, existing in their own bubble, and then they see you, and they scream, they go, ah! You know, every time they see you, ah! They scream and get excited, and their faces are extremely animated, and they run up to you, right? And they go down with one hit, And it was very simple, and also hilarious though, because whenever you come across a group of enemies, and you kill the last one always spawns a butterfly, right? Now in Yooka Laylee, butterflies are your health. You eat them. You have a tongue button, and you stick out your tongue. If there's nothing around you, the tongue doesn't come out far, but if there's something nearby to grab, it reaches, and you eat the butterflies, you get some health and all that. But I realize it's a little bit dark if you think about it. Just a little bit of that adult humor, which these games always had hidden, was you technically eat every enemy you defeat in Yooka Laylee, which is hilarious. Like, as children, any children playing this game won't think about it. They'll realize it later on in their adult years, or adults playing it for the first time. But every enemy you beat in Yooka Laylee, you eat them afterwards. You knock them down. They become a butterfly. You eat that butterfly, you technically ate them. Now, as a true collectathon game, you have 2 items for the most part that you collect, as well as some others. But the main thing is you collect feathers, right? You see feathers everywhere, and they are an excellent tool for letting you know where you have and where you haven't been. Because as I mentioned, especially the first world, it's very big, it's very broad, you're not sure where you've done. So when I was done going right, as I said at the start of my run through, I went to the right, I explored what's there, and then I came back. And I wasn't necessarily sure which way to go, but rotating the camera, I could see, oh, there's some floating, colorful looking, lovely feathers in the distance. I obviously haven't been there. So using feathers as a very slight guidance to let you know where you have and haven't been, I think is a great tool. Because you weren't really during that previous generation. During that last previous generation, you were never really looking at maps. You didn't, and it made sense. Kids aren't going to look at maps. Maps is way too much thinking, right? So you need visual cues on the screen always to let you know where should I go. And having, floating, bouncing up and down is an excellent visual cue to say, hey, go in that direction and explore. And explore is the key word of Yooka Laylee, right? Like when you're going around, and I can't stress enough how beautiful the music is. And I'm not even a big music person. That's why on the very few handful of games which I noticed the music and it really stands out, because it really sells the experience. And Yooka Laylee has gorgeous soundtracks. There's multiple worlds you can be in. We'll get into the later ones later on in the video. As I said, I want this to be a nice, slow, enjoying, drink your cup of coffee, my Yoshi mug, cup of coffee type of video. But yes, every world has a different soundtrack that just really sells the magic of it. And when you're going around listening to this nice soundtrack, having enemies for the most part that die in one hit and just animatedly, freak out every time they see you and charge at you, and you keep coming across obstacles, you're like, how do I get up there? And it's nice because it is such a slow pace and so different to, frankly, all of the video games that I enjoy. You just go, right? It's like you have all the time in the world. It's so relaxing and soothing where you'll stand there and you'll just look at something like, and you'll try, sticking your tongue all over. You'll try swinging at it or jumping at it. You try figure things out for yourself, and sometimes you'll reach areas which normally you wouldn't, and other times you're like, maybe I need to come back to this. Maybe this is one of those puzzles which I need to return to. So you continue exploring, right? You continue exploring. You keep collecting those feathers, which seem to be a lot of fun. You see them everywhere. And the feathers aren't for waste as well. Like, it isn't just collected for a redundant high score that you don't care about. It's like, no. All of them play their part, right? All of them play their part, because in Yooka Laylee, and this bit which I'm about to get into plays a huge part, to be honest, as to the success of the development of the game, is the way it introduces elements and the way it paces things is fantastic, right? So when you collect these feathers, you can use them to buy moves, right? You have this really wonderful character named Trouser, who is a snake who's just caught himself up into a pair of shorts and is called Trouser. And again, video game logic, don't question it. It's just a wonderful character who always helps you, right? And sometimes he gives you free moves and abilities, and other times you have to buy them, right? But what's good is, as you're exploring the game at your own wonderful pace, and as you keep collecting these feathers that are just scattered everywhere, right? There's like 200 per level or something, so they're everywhere, you know, so it's like a Korok seed, you look forward to finding them. And you can use them to buy new moves, and for the most part, the vast majority of moves make a big impact as to how you play. When you first play, you have two moves. You can move around, you can jump, and the only special ability you have is the ability to roll, which lets you go a bit faster. As I said, uses up a little bit of stamina and lets you go up hills. That's it, right? And the game environment is designed in a way where the vast majority of challenges you can manage. You can manage even without the moves. But if you get moves, they make things easier for you, right? And you look forward to it, and it changes how you approach things. So one move, for example, is, and keep in mind as well, because this is going to be a vigorous, in-depth video, there will absolutely be spoilers. Not in terms of story, it's a platform, I don't expect too much from story. But as far as, you know, unlocking moves and little this and that, the idea of you watching this video is you're already a fan, and you just want that acknowledgement to hear, you know, a YouTuber let you know, hey, I agree with you. I think this game is awesome. Or if you were in the fence, to give you that final push, right? Like, it's been like 3 coming to 4 years or something since this game came out. If you haven't already bought it and you've, you know, ignored all of the sales for the game since then, you've obviously made your decision not to buy the game yet. But hopefully by the end of this video, you might change your mind. So one move that you unlock for your bat friend, right, is she does a sonic wave thing, like this little circular noise thing comes out, you know, it's like it sounds a high-pitched sound, which is interesting as well. Actually, reading some developer commentary, all the moves you unlock in the game make sense to the characters and the animals that Yooka and Laylee are based off, you know. So Yooka is a chameleon, you know, they have the ability, they have a long tongue, right, and they can change their color to match the environment and so forth, and other little tricks. And you know, bats have their abilities, you know, they're really big on the whole sound thing, because technically bats are blind and this and that, and just they take a lot of inspiration where the moves make sense. Anyway, one of those moves is, you know, this little sound circle thing comes out, you know, uses a tiny bit of stamina. You can use it to stun the enemies, you know, which is pretty cool. You do that, they get a bit dizzy, they stand there. It's cool, right? Fun little move. Gives you your first aerial sort of attack, your first long distance attack, I should say. And remember I mentioned before, like sometimes you go to an area and you're like, can't really figure out what to do here. Maybe I'll come back to it later. That's why I actually really like the fact that in Yooka Laylee, enemies die really easily. And I read a number of reviews where they complained about it. They're like, you know, you can just ignore the enemies. You can just run past, you know, you can run past them, you can roll past them. Most of them die in one shot. What's the point? And you know what? That is the point. That is the point, because this game is not an action game. It is about the raw platforming. And, you know, I don't know if these reviewers, you know, not taking a stab, but maybe weren't old enough to actually review the game, just in case they didn't grow up in that generation. But the whole point of old 3D platformers, and keep in mind the reason why I keep going back to the old stuff, is that's what the Kickstarter was all about. It was all about going back to the old, trying to bring it back to modern, and trying to add a couple new bells and whistles. So you have to respect the old, because that's what it's about. I'm not forcing my old retro values onto a game where it doesn't belong. No, it absolutely belongs there. That was the whole selling point, right? You know, from the creators of Banjo Kazooie, during a time when Nintendo hadn't even adopted CDs yet. You know, there was still the cartridge, which, yay, you know, Nintendo Switch went back to cartridges, and now things load like that. Love cartridges. And in all of those old 3D platformers, whether it's Banjo Kazooie, whether it's Mario, whether it's, you know, Croc on the PS1, and even Crash Bandicoot, you know, the whole point of all those games was that enemies died easily. That was the point, that was the feature. The idea is to not be intimidated, to not be nervous, and you simply put up with them, you know. It's like the world belongs to the enemies and you are the outsider, you know. And if you want to beat them up for no reason, cool. I like to beat them up so then I can bring up my health. The different enemies made the worlds feel more alive. I liked it. I liked the fact that they died so easily. It was up to me whether or not I wanted to fight them. And, you know, they weren't completely useless though. They did hurt you. If you were trying to explore an area where there happens to be a bunch of enemies, they will run and attack you. Like, sure, just because most of them die in one shot doesn't mean they can't hurt you, doesn't mean they don't charge after you, so they're not completely useless. And they're very cute. So another way to describe this game as to the best way to enjoy it is to sort of approach it in the way which you approach Zelda Breath of the Wild. And yes, I'm doing it again. I am linking a game that has nothing to do with Breath of the Wild to Breath of the Wild because that's what I do, because I freaking love that game. But it's my channel, I'm going to do what I want. Now, in Breath of the Wild, a large part of it is just exploring the world, right? It's just exploring the world, going at about your own pace, you know, figuring out puzzles as you go along. But it's all about just slowly going through the world, enjoying it, taking it in, respecting everything that the game threw at you, right? And that approach to Yooka Laylee is the best way. If you're very objective driven, then 3D platformers aren't for you. You know, you can break it down to, yeah, charge occasionally, do a spin attack, jump into a bunch of areas, collect some items, repeat. Yeah, that sounds boring when you approach it that way, but what if the reason you're there is to take your time, is to enjoy the music, is to enjoy, you know, the beautiful visuals, which I'm going to talk about in a second, because they were really clever with the visuals and their designs and merging old and new. But, you know, I want to set that expectation because that's what it's all about, right? If you approach a game and an experience with a certain expectation in mind, you have the right standards set, well, then you're going to enjoy it, aren't you? But if you expect something else and then something else is delivered, then it's not so much, you know? So I'm the type of player who really likes taking my time. I love taking my time. I love it. I love open world games because I can take my time. I love admiring, you know, sunsets in a video games. I love it when, you know, when it rains in a video games, if things are glowing for no reason, you know. I love running up to water in video games and seeing how the water looks. You know, I've done a water video on this channel. I'll quickly post a little link here because it seems to be quite popular. Just talking about the history and the evolution of water graphics in video games, right? I think it's wonderful. And so it just really took me back. It really felt like I was back in time. Playing this game the whole way through this game was just, it was almost like it was teaching me how to have fun in 3D all over again. Even though I'm obviously already a master at it. Like, I did not struggle with this game at all. But that's not what the game was for. It's not what it was for. I loved climbing. I loved seeing how high I can get. And, you know, there's some excellent design choices which you don't think are there, but then they're there, then you're glad. And that is, you know, you have a lot of structures that you can climb. You have mountains, you have blocks and so forth. And these designs aren't designed smoothly to stop you from exploring. There's actually a lot of areas in Yooka Laylee where you can tell you're not necessarily meant to actually go there, you know? You're not necessarily even meant to be able to do that, but it's there anyway. So for example, there's a lot of walls that are uneven, that they have little cliffs, little edges, right? And you can tell it's not part of the game. You're not meant to climb on that, right? You're meant to take the drawbridge that is right in front of you and everything's glowing and it's obvious you're meant to go down there. But then you look at the side, you see some ledges and this and that, and there's no rewards there either. You know, there isn't any feathers waiting for you saying, hey, take this alternative path. But if you want to, you can jump and reach a lot of areas which you're not meant to. And it breaks the game slightly, but not in a bad sense. It's just this thrill, frankly, that you've sort of reached an area of the game an area of the map that you weren't necessarily meant to reach, right? Because that was a common trope in the early days, right? Developers were just figuring it out. They were really figuring out, and a lot of times, you know, you could maybe access areas that you weren't meant to, and Yooka Laylee is just like that. Speaking of design, and you talk about the graphics, right? I love what I see in this game. Now, look, I played this game on my PC. I've played this game years after launch, you know, so I'm assuming any bugs, any little mishaps. I read online as well that when the game launched, it didn't have a great camera, right? Didn't have a great camera. Apparently, if you went to certain areas, the camera would spaz out. I experienced none of that, and I have read online that they patched that through, so good on them. Also, one area which I'm glad they did fix and would have been very annoying is in the old Banjo Kazooie games, whenever you spoke to an NPC, you would hear them go and you know, if you've played those games, that probably sounded spot on. Whenever you spoke to anyone, they just made little weird noises like that while the text would form on the screen. And so naturally, you know, being a successor of sorts to Banjo Kazooie, they implemented that into Yooka Laylee. It was really annoying. It was really cute at first, but if you're speaking to someone who has a lot to say, and the whole time they're going, and then it's your turn to talk, and then you're, I did that extra just now because I know I've already annoyed you. Just to put that across, it gets a bit annoying. So after like 2 weeks of the game launching, the developers, you know, released an update saying, hey, we're aware of the feedback. We'll do a thing if you go into the options menu, you can remove that and drastically reduce it, which is what they did, which is what I did immediately, because as soon as I started playing this, I really hated talking to NPCs. But you go in the options, you reduce it, and you know, say that the NPC has like this much of dialogue to you, they'll just do that for like the first line, that's it. And it's nice, it keeps the character and personalities of the older games without annoying you every step of the way. But going back to the engine and the graphics, my goodness, I enjoyed my time in these beautiful worlds. So this game, surprisingly, was actually made with the Unity engine. And I'm not bagging on Unity, but if I'm to be just brutally frank here, right? You have Unity and you have Unreal Engine, and Unreal Engine in terms of graphics, in terms of performance, in terms of everything, frankly, Unreal Engine is the way to go, right? Just, it's superior and games look much better. Whenever Unity games get too ambitious, there's normally performance problems as well. So I was surprised to learn that Yooka Laylee was made with Unity, but you know what? They did an amazing job. And also Unity is apparently, I haven't used the engine, I need to get around to playing around with it. But apparently Unity is a lot easier to start off with, right? It's a lot, it's very user friendly, apparently, compared to Unreal Engine. I use Unreal Engine, but I haven't used Unity. Anyway, they use that, right? This game is wonderful. It looks as good as it sounds. So first, let's talk about what you see like on the ground and the textures, right? So inspiration is obviously from the Nintendo 64 era, where you had repeated textures. During this time, fair to say that during the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation era, everything was blurry. Everything was blurry, man. Those consoles were doing the best they can. They were blurry, but you know what? We were playing 3D for the first time on CRT TVs. You know, the tube boxes. So, you know, we didn't mind, we didn't care, we didn't notice, we didn't know any better, right? So what's their approach? Like, are we going to have muggy textures in a modern 3D revival? Like, what's their approach? And I have to say, I really dig their approach, right? The textures are simple. They're pretty simple. There's a lot of color merging. However, the actual environment, the meshes themselves, seem to have a lot of bumps to it. And it feels like this sort of visual style is what developers of the past would have guessed games of the future would look like. So I really liked it. There wasn't anything ever high def. You know, there wasn't like something with like, you know, amazing bump mapping and amazing details, and it just looked really high resolution, because that would look weird. It would look out of place, right? So instead, the visuals you get look like a high-end Super Nintendo 64, right? As if like they grabbed Nintendo 64 and they like, you know, doubled the RAM by like 100% or something, but kept all the limitations, and then that's what you got. I love the ground, I love the walls, I love the textures, I love the colors. You know, nothing ever felt like a step back, you know. Technically, a lot of things were done really well. I really liked the shadow work. Draw distance in Yooka Laylee was wonderful. So here's a good example, right? I'll make sure I hunt down the footage to show you, because it was just a little bit of a wow moment. Anyone who knows anything about game design, or frankly, if you've simply been a gamer for long enough, you would have noticed draw distance is a big deal, right? You want to continuously save resources. So if you're playing an open world game and there is something really, really, really far off in the distance, you don't need to render that, right? You don't need to render that. That is a waste of resources. You know, you can render it as you get closer. So normally things at a distance, small irrelevant details, normally aren't shown. But in Yooka Laylee, everything is shown. So I've gone on the highest point of the game, at least at that stage that I could go, right? And I'm having a look down at the first world map, and I'm just taking in its beauty, right? I'm just being a graphics perv. Like, I'm perving on graphics all the time. It's what I do with video games, and especially Yooka Laylee. And while I'm doing that, I can see the fire in the distance coming out of the wall, right? In a very far area. I can even see some leaves. Not leaves. Feathers. I can even see some feathers in the distance bouncing up and down. And I have to say, as far as immersion goes, it really felt up there. It really felt up there that I was so freaking far away from these items and these enemies that frankly in any other game wouldn't have been rendered because it's too far, you know, waste of resources, this and that. But they're like, no, we're gonna render it. And that's a small taste of like a moment where if you were to remake a Nintendo 64 game but give it features that wouldn't have existed in that era, I feel that's one of them. I feel that was a little nod. It's like, yes, you know, we're going to have a lot of features that are very, you know, old styled, and the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation, you know, they had horrible draw distances, like mere feet away sometimes, right? You wouldn't really see things. So to be able to see enemies moving about, you know, traps moving, those feathers still bouncing, that was awesome. That was really awesome, you know. I was even able to jump off that cliff and go falling down all the way down, right? Only a little bit of damage. It wasn't something that killed you, but it was just satisfying to go splat, you know, and have your bat friend lift you up. But, you know, while I fell, you know, the world wasn't chugging, it wasn't struggling to keep up. It let me do that, which was actually quite impressive. Now let's talk about the water. Oh, the water in this game is beautiful. Beautiful. I love the water style. I love the hyper game water. So you see it right now. Old school water is very unrealistic but very pretty to the eyes. Old school video game water is ridiculously clean. It is like the most filtered, clean, gorgeous thing you will ever see, right? In modern games, because we want realism and not bagging them, but just saying more realistic games aren't going to have you be able to see through the water surface at every single angle. You know, they'll try to create the distortions. They'll try to have the water a bit muggy because, you know, water isn't this perfect clear liquid. Like, you know, if it's in the beach, there's sand and dirt and running. No, not with the old games, and not with Yooka Laylee. I loved going through the water where everything was so clear and very minimal. I love the fact that I could stand there and float, and there was just a slight distortion in the visuals, right? But not much. For the most part, you can really see Yooka and Laylee. You know, it's really nice and clear. It's really calming. True video game style. As soon as you go in the water, the music changes to set the tone, and then when you emerge again, the normal music continues. I love the fact that when you were under the water, you could look up and you could see the distortions, and sometimes you can get some gorgeous effect. I like the fact that there was large random volumes of water, because that is very gamey. It doesn't need to make sense. It just needs to be there. It just needs to be there. So I like the bits where I could swim. I like that, you know, in one of the first areas that you do swim, there's a puzzle that you can't solve, and you're like, oh, how, you know, there's this air pressure being pushed. You're like, how do I? And I tried to beat it and I couldn't. And it was one of those situations where when you get an ability, you can go back. And it was fun making those little mental notes. It was fun because, don't get me wrong, there's a lot you can do without the abilities. But it was nice that there were plenty of moments as well that I needed an ability, because that implements replay value. That means at some point, I can come back to this world and access a whole bunch of extra areas. And what Yooka Laylee managed to do quite well as well is they were always continuously throwing something new and interesting to me. So for example, while I'm playing the game, I just saw a massive arcade. It's just an arcade machine just sitting there in the distance. And I'm like, what? It's just glowing, has neon lights. And I'm like, all right, what is this spectacular fan service I can see in the distance? So I go over and I meet Rex, you know, this retro dinosaur who's like, you know, there's a lot of polygons to him. and there's a lot of in-joke humor as well. The game pokes a lot of fun at itself. The game pokes a lot of fun at modern games, retro games, like just going back and forth. It's just very, very good humor. And the loading screen said, hey, if we were still using cartridges instead of CDs, this loading screen would have been over already. And it's like, snap. Because for those of you who don't know, accessing the RAM information on cartridges is actually a lot quicker than CDs. So, you think of cartridges, you're thinking that's a step back. Well, in terms of, volume, how much data it can hold, yeah, it was. But in terms of access and speed, cartridges were actually faster. Very, very quickly. If you're watching this video, I'm assuming you're a retro fan, so allow me to educate you. Allow me to be a geek, because that's what I do. But if you enjoyed the PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64 eras, did you know that on Nintendo 64, games loaded like that? And that was not a mistake. That was not some advanced coding. That was a result of cartridges. See, if you had a PlayStation 1 during the day, you got very used to staring at a lot of loading screens for a long time. Like, granted, we put up with it because, it was a small price to pay, to experience a PS1. Like, it was amazing. But you would stare at a loading screen, and that could be there anywhere between 30 seconds to 4 minutes. Like, just, it really varied, right? Whereas on Nintendo 64, every single game loaded like this. Now it's because of the cartridge. So there are certain cartridges advantages. So our new Dino friend lets us play a game, and look, it was a fun little mini game. It wasn't anything major, but the thing to remember is, once again, going back to the source material, during that era, when you played a 3D platformer, it was not rare at all. It was almost expected to have random mini games. They weren't necessarily fun. Sometimes they were fun, that was a big plus, but it just added random variety. It was just a fun thing that developers always did, where you could find little mini games. Normally they were little races, normally they were very basic, physics-based games, or a top-down bird's eye view of some sort of racing or whatever. And Yooka Laylee is no exception to that. There is a lot of old school games, some fun, some not so much, but every single world has them, right? Every single world has them. Sometimes they're hidden, sometimes they're not. But it was just nice to be there. It was just another example of just retro gaming at its finest, where it doesn't need to make sense. Yes, I was exploring this big, beautiful world, and why in the world was there a huge retro machine that was like 50 feet tall or something? What was that doing there? Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to make sense. Just let me have my fun. Now let's talk about our second main collectible, right? It's made up of feathers and pages. Basically, the story goes, you had a book stolen from you, and what a book's made out of? Pages. So every single world has a bunch of pages that are hidden. It is your job to hunt down these pages, collect them all, as well with the feathers. Now, what's really cool about the pages is you normally do little tasks, you get them, or they're in out of reach areas, always rewarding you, right? When you're done with the world, when you feel you've explored everything, and keep in mind, there's actually more collectibles than even what I've said. You have your pages, you have your feathers, you also have these, little spirit monster things that they're always well hidden. You normally need to do something special in order to get them as well. And there's even hidden skulls and other hidden symbols around the game world. So if you really are enjoying a particular level, there's a lot of reason to vigorously explore it. You're not going to find everything straight away. So even though it's old style, it doesn't mean it's easy. So you have fun, you have heaps of things to explore, right? Anyway, say you're done with that, or you're like, for now, I'm done, I want to go. Okay, how you enter each world, which is Q. It's Q, right? Every world is in a book. Every world is in a book. So you go up to a book, you unlock it, with pages. And the book opens, and then you jump in, the book eats you, and then you're just thrown into the magical world, which is really nice. I like that, because through the power of books, you can be thrown into any world. And again, it does something with the imagination, creativity. There's something my little young child brain just really likes about it. Anyways, when I was done with the first area and I jumped out of the book, I had forgotten this. The game had told me, but I had already forgotten. That was, you could expand the world. It's like, okay. So I jumped out and I was going to go to the next area, and I'm like, let's expand the world. What does that even mean? What does that even mean? And so then the pages that I collected that were hidden throughout the first world, those same pages let me expand the first world. It's like, oh, okay, let's do it. So I expanded it. And then it does this really nice little animation where the book gets much bigger, right? It just doubles in volume. and you jump back. And that's when I was like, oh, pacing, the developers get a gold medal for this. I went back into the world that I already felt super familiar with. I felt I had explored every single inch for the most part, and I didn't really have much of a reason to go back, but I thought, let's see what happens. And then all of a sudden, there was platforms and mountains and towers and items and all these extra things where the game world, on just stage 1, mind you, there's like 5 of them, on just stage 1, all of a sudden expanded really, really far. And when you do that as well, the game will, subtle hint you and just go and, free camera, just fly in the areas, show you everything that has been unlocked. So it doesn't become this negative thing of like, oh, I need to revisit all the areas I've already been to, just in case there's something new there. It's like, no, you know exactly where to go because it shows it and you can see it. And I loved it. I loved this approach. Because remember at the start of the video how I said if you started Yooka Laylee with all the moves at once, you wouldn't appreciate it. You would ignore some. It just wouldn't be good. This approach with expanding a world you have already mastered for the most part is beautiful, right? Is beautiful because I already felt like a little bit of a champ. Like it was just world 1, but I already felt like a bit of a champ. So I really welcomed all of the expansions, right? It was really cool, the familiar felt new again. And what an expansion it was. Like we're not talking a few extra random items. We're talking entire sections of the map and the world opened up. And I thought it was brilliant because if that was already available from the start, I think I would have felt overwhelmed. It would have felt too much. I mean, some of the platforming goes up like right into the sky, like really, really high, right? And it would have felt like there was too many options to begin with. But the fact that it was introduced later because I chose to expand it was fantastic and very new user friendly. Maybe children or maybe people who don't have that much time will be content with just beating the first world in the form that it's given to them, right? You get enough tools, you get enough goodness, and you can go on to world 2. But the fact that if you wanted to go back to it, and get even more and spend more time there, and then all those expansions don't feel like overwhelming you because it's been added, it wasn't simply there to begin with. I really like that. And plus, gave extra value to the pages that you were collecting. See, I personally don't really care about high scores, stuff like that. So if a game wants me to collect something just because a score I'm paying no attention to will go up in return, that does nothing for me. But the fact that the feathers are used to buy extra moves that I really benefit from, the fact that the pages let me expand, it's like inbuilt DLC or something to the game, the fact that the pages let me expand a world I had already fallen in love with, wonderful. Alright, so we're done with the first world. Keep in mind, all this talk, all this passion, all this goodness was just world 1. World 1, ladies and gentlemen. This game just had so much charm. I love it so much. So world 2, right? You go into world 2 once again, you dive into a book. And the diving into the book aspect is exciting. There could be anything in that book, right? And in true retro style, every time you went to a world, it had a different theme. Maybe a fire, ice, sand, space, whatever, right? So we go to the second world and it's ice. Right? It's like, oh yes, like that Christmas theme. There was always an ice world. I love the ice stages in Croc. I thought they were awesome. I remembered the music in Croc, especially during the ice stages, to be magical and whimsical. And straight away with Yooka Laylee, ladies and gentlemen, I loved what I heard. I loved it. I just stood there and I just so slowly rotated the camera, right? Zooming in and out very slowly, very gradually, just listening to that music. It did it perfectly, right? Like, it did it perfectly. I had no idea how important sound was to 3D platformers, but Yooka Laylee reminding you, hey, if you're going to do a 3D platformer, you need to get that magic music. You need to get that feeling of endless possibilities music in there. And I loved it, you know, running around, brand new world, there's snow covered on everything, there's ice. You get taught a new move, you know, and this move was when you jumped in the air, you held onto your bat friend's feet, and she flapped her wings and just helped you get a further distance, right? Because otherwise you went into the water and you couldn't progress. What's cool though is this is the first example of when you go into World 2, how you see how the developers cleverly recycled what you're already familiar with, but to change to the theme. So then I came across the monsters for this second world, and it's like, oh, I know these guys. These are the first guys I dealt with in the first stage, but now they've been ice themed, right? And they look a little bit different and their attacks are the same. But the point is the world has changed, so have they. And I thought that was good. I thought that was good because then it wasn't pressure, right? It wasn't this added pressure. You knew exactly how to deal with them, but they looked different and it was nice. Go about collecting your feathers, you know, wondering what awesome moves you will unlock this time. And of course there was little environmental challenges as well. So our green friend is a chameleon, you know, they adapt to their environment, and it was in this world where I started using his tongue properly for the first time, right? See, if you put your tongue on something, he becomes that color, or to be more specific, he inherits those attributes. So if you put your tongue on the right thing, right? You know, maybe we'll give you the ability to withstand cold, or maybe give you the ability to withstand heat better, and that's what this stage did. See, I went to this area where there was almost like a magical wall. As soon as I walked through, my character started getting hurt out of nowhere. It's like they got sucker punched by an invisible ghost. Like out of nowhere, just kept taking damage. And the text was saying, hey, it's a bit too cold. I'm like, it's a bit too cold, huh? Oh, Breath of the Wild's reference. It was a bit too cold. So I'm like, oh, okay. I guess I'll have to come back here when I'm warmer. However you do that. And yeah, you see things, but you stick your tongue to it, you become colder. And you go, and you end up using your tongue a lot, but it was a nice touch. It was nice that it was taught with the world. It felt like a little bit of a natural progression. See, every time you enter a new world in Yooka Laylee, you always get some very light puzzle elements that just introduce things, right? Yooka Laylee actually has an awful lot of moves and abilities and things to keep in mind. So if they were all thrown at you on, you know, on world 1, it would have been too much. It would have been too much. But again, I keep reiterating, they seem to be masters of natural progression. Nothing felt too much the way they introduced it. In stage 2, I developed the ability to high jump finally. There were definitely moments in the first world and in the second where I couldn't reach something. I was trying to jump, I couldn't do it, and it was infuriating. Then I found out from trials, hey, I can buy an ability where I can just spring off my tail, jump a little bit further. Then all of a sudden I had all these thoughts in my head, like, oh wow, I can go to this and that place, I can go back to world 1 and I can reach that. And just, it feels like a really good natural extension of the moveset where you just use it continuously all the time, as opposed to just for, you know, a set specific amount of puzzles. It was just handy to be able to jump higher, and I really appreciated that. Once again, the game let you go in any direction you wanted, so you always had this continuous sense of wonder of you choose which way you want to go, what you want to explore, you know, using your new continuously evolving skill set, jumping in the water, finding out what's in there. When you went into the water, you found out that there was a lot more to it. In World 1, when you jumped in the water, there was no monsters, there was no creatures, it was just you. But in the second world, there were creatures that would attack you. they would attack you, but you could see floating feathers in the water, so you knew you had to go there, you know. The game was continuously reminding you there's always more there than what you can see. You know, while I was underwater, I saw these massive chain locks, you know, comically on these doors under the water, and I'm like, what's in there? How do I get in there? You know? A particularly smart moment, which I really enjoyed because I couldn't figure it out at first, right? So it's really light puzzle elements, but I couldn't figure it out. There was a hill, right? It was a hill, and previously if I wanted to go up a hill that was a bit too slanty, I just rolled up it, right? That's what I did in World 1. But in World 2, I tried to do it and I kept sliding right off. But you have to remember, in Stage 2, everything's covered in snow and ice, so I just kept sliding, right? Rolling wasn't enough and I couldn't figure out what to do. On a separate note, and you know the answer straight away because of the way I've introduced it, but at the time I had no idea, there was this honey, right? There was a honey cove, honeybee, a thing with honey. Anyway, you'd attack it with your tongue, right? All of a sudden you got a little bit of a yellowish color, and it didn't seem to do anything. But the honey thing it didn't do anything. It didn't change my moveset. It was like, what are you for? And eventually I realized honey is sticky, right? So if you went and you used your tongue on the honey thing, and then you went yellow, and then you tried to then roll up the ice hill that you were continuously falling down before, all of a sudden you're not falling down. All of a sudden you're not falling down because you're sticking to the surface. And it was just nice because the game didn't point it out to you, you know? Like, the game has confidence that you're just going to keep doing things over and over again until you figure it out. And that was how games were done back then. And it was nice. It was nice. It wasn't anything, you know, really difficult and all that. Like, my goodness, eventually anyone will figure it out. But it still had this nice sense of satisfaction of like, hey, you didn't tell me what this was for, but then I figured it out, and now I have this good satisfying feeling, right? Like, I did it. Continuously unlocking new moves with each new world you went into was really good as well, because you would unlock it, right? You never felt like you had seen everything the game had to show you. You knew when you went to the next world, you were going to come across new puzzles, you were going to come across new abilities, you were going to buy new moves, and it was fun to think, I wonder what the next one will be, because a lot of them are good. Actually, almost every single move, apart from maybe two, I used continuously on an ongoing basis. And then there were just other fun bits where, you know, if you did your tongue thing to some cannonballs, I kid you not, you lick the cannonballs, and of course, game logic, that gives you the ability to shoot cannonballs at everyone for a limited amount of time, plus look different. So it's like, that's cool, let's do this. You're running around and you're shooting cannonballs everywhere. Again, gamer logic, you know, it helped you beat some puzzles and so forth, but it was nice. And it was also the eye candy, which I really enjoyed as well. See, I loved it that whenever you licked, they had these special flowers, right? Which the flowers are there from the start, and the game tells you nothing about them until you unlock the ability, which was really cool because it was everywhere. I kept seeing these whitish, bluish flowers. I kept seeing these, these fire burning like flowers because they were glowing. They look cool, right? Could never do anything with them. Tried to put my tongue at them. Nothing would happen. Turned out I had to unlock a specific move to make that happen. And it just looks so awesome when you finally get that ability and you go and you stick your tongue to them, and then the back ears, right, of Yooka start glowing, and it just looks so sick. I've always liked, you know, glowing neon, whatever. I like things that glow, right? I'm a 90s kid. Like, sue me, if something glowed, it was cool. But I really liked how it looked. I liked that, you know, it wasn't just you got a new ability, you physically looked different, and if you stood in dark areas while you did that, you glowed. And these abilities were cool as well. You know, it let you breathe fire one moment, it let you spit out water the next. You know, it's just all these moves, all these abilities. Sometimes abilities you unlocked, other times they were, you know, based on the environment. And again, the whole time just admiring that soundtrack, man. Like, it was just gorgeous. It's just gorgeous. I'd deliberately walk around as slowly as possible and just listen to that music. It just really sold it. And I did a little bit of a test, and I like muted the sound for a bit to play without the music. It killed me. I couldn't do it. You needed that warm, whimsical music, because, you know, it's like the music of your childhood, like endless possibilities. You know, when you run around in these worlds, because of the sounds that everything makes, it feels like the world is welcoming you every step of the way, right? Like the music itself is telling you secrets, bright colors. One thing which I haven't mentioned yet either, and look, I just like this, it didn't add too much to the game, but I thought it was fun, was every single world has like a mad scientist chick, right? Where she's like part octopus, part human or whatever. Anyway, she has this machine, and this machine is in every level, she's in every level, and she can transform you into a different object with different abilities. So in the first level, for example, she transformed you into a flower. She transformed you into a flower, and then you gained the very limited flower abilities that flower has. And you know, it was just cool because again, gamer logic, why not? But what was cool with that though is I had noticed throughout the game world, in world 1, purposely didn't mention it, there were these flower characters where whenever you tried to talk to them, it gave you the option, they'll be like, I have nothing to say to you, you know, and you're like, huh, rude, okay. And you just carry on, whatever. But if you go back and try to talk to them as a flower, then they give you hints. They give you hints, they tell you where secrets are because, you know, you're one of their kind now. You know, some of the missions you need to be a flower in order to do. One flower actually asks you for help, so you go ahead and do that. And yeah, every world had a different transformation. Sometimes it was cool, sometimes it was just, you know, specific to simply, you know, complete 1 or 2 particular puzzles. But it was just nice to look forward to. It was just nice to know that, you know, I really enjoy managed anticipation and expectations, right? I like that while I was enjoying a world, you know, I like the fact that no matter how much I was enjoying it, when I was done doing the majority of things, I could exit the book, I could pay with the pages that I had found, and then expand it and go back, you know? It was fun that every time I was enjoying something, I knew I was enjoying version 1. And that when I want to expand it later, I'll get to enjoy version 2, which always expanded, which always added extra items, which always added extra challenges, and so forth. It's like a nice tease, you know? I like that the game didn't throw too much at you, let you get used to things, and then when you want to up it, when you feel confident enough, then you could do that. The game also had another feature called tonics, right? So there's this scary yellow sponge thing that's meant to be a tonic lady who is in every single world, right? As you do different things, you unlock different tonics. Now these tonics were basically game cheats, right? It you know, it made things a little bit easier, like maybe gave you a little bit more stamina, you know, maybe helped you jump, maybe stopped you taking 4 damage if you decide to jump off a cliff. The one which I enjoyed the most was a visual aesthetic, which I think they did a really good job of it. There was one tonic that basically made the game 16-bit, right? Which that was like a huge nod to fans, and I know it's one of the milestones as part of the Kickstarter. And I think they did a fantastic job. This tonic converted this gorgeous looking modern 3D platformer into what honestly a Nintendo 64 version of this game may have looked like, right? Like we're talking a different character model, different textures, like I'll show it to you now, you know, the before and after, but it's just amazing how well a job it is. You can, once you unlock this tonic, if you want, you can play the whole game with graphics as if you really are playing it from the Nintendo 64 era. Like it's just, I think it was done really well. I've played a lot of games which, you know, try to add a retro filter and, you know, all they do is like pixelize things and so forth. But this was handcrafted and made to like, no, this is what it would have looked like on the older generation consoles with their limitations in mind. I think they did fantastic. Like even the water is just, you know, just a slightly transparent blue box, you know, which is, you know, if you watch that video, which I had mentioned previously, you know, the history of video game graphics with water, they did a great job. So that was a little bit of a, that's cool. And what's really awesome as well is if you play in that mode for a bit and then you're like, right, okay, I want to switch this tonic off. I want to get the normal modern graphics back. When you've been playing it in that mode and then you switch it back to the modern graphics, it's like pow, like just like, oh wow, like you thought the game already looked gorgeous before, but then when you play in the Nintendo 64 version, right, and then you put it back, you're just blown away. You're like, wow, what graphics really have come a long way. And also, like, in the distance as well, there's a little bit of a depth of field, you know. Depth of field, that's not something which would have existed in that era, but it's there, it's subtle, and I really like it because, you know, it's an effect which wouldn't have existed, you know, back in the day, but it's used very sparingly and only for very far objects. You know, it isn't too prominent, because if it was too prominent, then the game would have looked a little bit too fancy, and then it would have, you know, sort of left the original inspiration. Now, obviously, like a good hour or so later, depending on how much I edit this video, it's clear I love this game. It's clear that I vigorously disagree with, not with people who disliked it, like if you disliked it, fine, but with those whose main critique was the fact that it was too close to the original source material. That was the whole point of the Kickstarter. The whole everything was like, hey, nostalgic fans who miss video games from a certain genre, from a certain generation, we're going to try bring back that feeling, right? And of course that comes with certain limitations with it. But limitation sounds like a bad word. All it meant was they didn't add too much to it, right? They didn't add too many bells and whistles, which would have completely not made sense. So then it feels like the old games, but it looks more like a modern game. And I think they absolutely nailed that. They nailed that. The enemies should be easy because that's not what the game is about. You know, this genre, 3D platforming, isn't about, you know, doing 5-6 hit combos to your enemies and having a real challenge and like a bit of a Dark Souls experience or whatever. It's like, no. Enemies were always an afterthought with these old games. So you wanted to be able to push them aside because that was not the main player. The main player was the world itself and taking it in. And I think they nailed it. The sound for every single world was good, even though there's just 5 of them if I've counted correctly. Every single world feels very different. Every single world has hours and hours of gameplay, especially if you want to take your time and collect everything. You know, puzzles are fun, challenges are fun. You have different arcade games, as I mentioned before. You know, there's some speed races, which are a good bit of fun, which you just need to go from objective A to objective B within a certain time limit. You know, cracking those secrets, finding extra areas, always a pleasure. Continuously unlocking things, you know, expanding the books you've already found. And even the World Hub is quite interesting. The World Hub is a little bit confusing. Like, you basically move from area to area. You have a big main World Hub, right? And in the hub is where you find the books. So whenever you found the books, that's where you jumped into the stage and you went ahead. But connecting all the stages was a hub, was a free flow area, which had some enemies and so forth, and you explored. And it was surprisingly really big, right? It wasn't like you were just in a like a long hall, right? It's not like you're in a hall and you go into world 1, you jump out of world 1, you run down the hall, and then you open the door to world 2. It's like, no, like the hub itself is a world itself, right? So it was easy to you know, to get lost to get lost occasionally. It wasn't a bad experience, but I just bring it up because you know, it is part of the gameplay. And also in the hub itself, you would find extra hidden items and so forth, and it was really cool because just like the stages, you would revisit areas of the hub, which was wonderful. So in the first world, you know, I always noticed that there were like these pipe things above me, right? And they had a crack in it, and I tried, you know, swinging, using my tongue on it, headbutting it, whatever. I couldn't break it, and it wasn't until much later on that I got an ability that did a little bit of a shockwave thing, which was really cool. And I thought, oh, is that it? You know, and I remembered. And so I went all the way back into that first hub area and I broke it and I got the Pagey. And yes, Pagey isn't the biggest reward. You find heaps of them, but it didn't make the experience any less for it. It was fun. It was fun. It was nice to go back. It was nice to know that the hub world itself was a world itself, you know. By that logic, in a way, technically, you have like 6 worlds instead of 5. So this was my attempt several years later of restoring balance for this game. It is good. It is a great game. I feel it delivers on its promise. Hey, the promise is very simple, you know. Feel a little bit nostalgic. Do you want to go back to simple modern 3D platforming days where it feels like you're back in the Nintendo 64 versus PlayStation 1 era sort of days, but with some modern graphics, with some modern twists here and there. And frankly, just a fun game. Like, you unlock a lot of moves, a lot of abilities, everything is delightful. Bosses aren't too hard to figure out. It's just a delight. You go around, it's a delight. What more can I say? But yeah, reviewers who reviewed it at the time complaining that, it was just like a boring collectathon in a boring world, shame on you. That was the whole point of these genres, and they weren't boring. That was the game style. It is the equivalent of someone reviewing a racing game and, complaining that you can't get out of the car. Complaining that you spend too much time behind the wheels. Complaining that the only thing you can do in the racing game is race. That's the point. Again, if you don't like this genre of gaming, this isn't going to change your mind. Just like any game from any genre isn't going to change your mind if you don't like the genre. But if you like 3D platformers, if you miss that sort of experience or you want to know what it's about, give it a chance. I honestly think it's great. My only concern now is because Yooka Laylee wasn't, commercially, globally, as successful as they would have liked, and then they made the next Yooka Laylee game, Yooka Laylee and the Impossible Lair. As fun as that is, right? As fun as that is, and I've been watching a fellow YouTuber do a playthrough of it as well. Put a little shout out here. This guy right here. I've enjoyed him watching. I've enjoyed watching him play the game. It's a nice 2D side scroller. I'm glad they could reuse the assets. I'm glad, as far as review scores go, they did a lot better with that game. But now I'm worried that because people didn't appreciate the first game enough. Now I'm worried that we're done with Yooka Laylee, because I would love a Yooka Laylee 2, right? But the full 3D world experience, the first one nailed it. They absolutely delivered it as far as I'm concerned. And now I'm a bit gutted. I'm a bit gutted because now it might not happen. It might not happen. They might stick with the 2D side-scrolling thing because the reviewers were nicer to that. And, yeah, come on, Playtonic, make Yooka Laylee 2, right? Make it, I reckon you can do it. The first one was great. And the thing that's happened as well to keep in mind is, even though the initial reception wasn't great, if you look through like the Steam reviews, for example, or anywhere, the fans freaking love this game. They love it. Sure, a lot of us probably jumped on board, a bit later than we should have. Because we believe reviews, which in our defense, I don't have much money. So if enough people and reviewers say a game isn't particularly great, I'm normally going to take their word for it, mostly just because I can't afford to challenge them every time. Like, say I'm interested in 10 games a year and I can afford maybe 4 of them throughout the year, I'm probably going to pick the 4 that has gotten more of the glowing reviews and then check out the other 6 when there's enough of a sale going on. But you look at those online reviews, everyone who after the fact, either on a sale or just decides, screw, I'm going to buy it anyway, they've all left really good reviews. They like this game. That community is there, right? They've proven themselves as far as I'm concerned. So for Yooka Laylee 2, 3D, big, gorgeous, open world, that's the sort of thing. Not open world, but you know what I mean. 3D, old school, we would be there. We would be there. I would get it, immediately to support. But I guess we'll see what happens. Everything takes time, Yooka Laylee, the brand, isn't going anywhere. They have a lot of things you can buy online, books, toys. Impossible Lair is still technically another Yooka Laylee game. I'm pretty sure I saw Yooka Laylee appear in a 3D fighting game of all things as well. So the brand is out there. If you've lasted this long and you haven't already because you've simply forgotten, hurry up, hit the subscribe button. We obviously are just as passionate about video games as each other, right? You're here this long. I'm glad. I appreciate your time sticking around. Thank you for hearing me out. I just wanted to talk about this wonderful game. Every time I play a game and I vigorously enjoy it, I like to talk about it here at Gaming My Whole Life, because for the most part, this channel is just an excuse for me to share my passion with the world, really. And that's to talk about the greatest industry in the world as far as I'm concerned, and that is video games. So yeah, please consider subscribing. I have a whole bunch of videos covering everything you can think of: retro, modern, PSVR, gaming subjects. I have dedicated playlists. Feel free to go through the backlog, because that's the fun thing at subscribing here at Gaming My Whole Life. I cover an awful lot of videos. And I'm not talking about random Let's Plays of there's like, 50 videos of me talking about the same game or just uploading footage. Like, no, I'm talking like different subjects, different everything. Like, you will definitely find something that you like. Otherwise, just give me a thumbs up. I think I earned it with you being around this long. And comment below. I really want to connect. I really want to connect with the other Yooka Laylee fans. I mean, tell me about your experience. I would love to hear your experience. Were you one of the original backers and you loved the game and you didn't understand what the negative reviews were about? Did you get it later after the fact, like me, with a sale, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is actually great? Do you have a completely different story? I would love to hear your take, your views, your thoughts on the fun that you've had with Yooka Laylee, what you'd like to see in a sequel. And with that being said, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging out with me. Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you all live on this big blue planet of ours. God bless you all. Take care. And I'll see you for the next video. Normally, my videos aren't massively long like this, but you know what? I was super passionate. I wanted to give the respect that was due, and I've done my part, right? I've done my part. I've let everyone know this game's amazing. If you are on the fence and you like this sort of game, hurry up, go buy, go enjoy it on your preferred platform of choice. I played it on PC. It ran flawlessly for me. I'll see you all for the next video. Bye-bye.